Welcome, everybody, to today's edition of Sages. We've got a very interesting guest with us today. His name is Jim Lumpkin. And if you've been in Pentecost any time for any length of time, you're going to recognize that name. And he is a dear friend of mine, longtime friend. And we're going to be talking about transitions. And there are a number of transitions that we will take in our lifetime during our ministries, change of churches and the like. But when it comes to those who are in our age group, the transition becomes a little bit more permanent, and that is transitioning from lead pastor to a bishop or just a pew sitter, one way or the other. But Brother Lumpkin has just turned his church over to his choice, and we're going to interview him and get his ideas about those particular challenges. Brother Lumpkin, welcome. We're glad that you're here with us.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Brother Chapman.
All right. It's wonderful to see you. And we've been friends for quite a while. His father was my first superintendent coming into the Arkansas district, and so this family is very dear to me. Brother Lumpkin, you've just done a transition, and you've turned your church that you've been. How long have you been with Word of Flame, if that's what it's still called there?
We were pastor there for 32 years.
42 years. Okay, that's a good long time, and so just talk about your thoughts coming into turning your church over to somebody, and then how you made your choice for your replacement.
Well, I don't think we are the prototype for transition, but it's been about 3 years now. And I had been thinking about transition, but didn't really have anything in place. The reason I was thinking about it was because I didn't feel like I had the same energy or the creativity I had when I was a little bit younger. But I didn't really have anybody in place. But because of some health issues uh, that was ongoing, I had open heart surgery in 18. And then about a year later, I had a kidney removed. And so I had some pretty serious issues with diabetes. And my superintendent, Tim Gaddy, called me and wanted to meet with me. And I didn't think I was in trouble and was going to get my license taken. But anyway, we finally met. And he said, he calls me as pastor. He said, "Pastor, I'm very concerned about your health." And I said, "Well, yeah, my whole family is." And so he said, what do you have planned for transition?" I said, I don't. Uh, I don't really have anything in place. Haven't really planned on it. I've been thinking about it, but I don't have anything in place. Well, at the time, I had a man working with me that I had brought in and asked him to give me a year while I was recovering from my kidney surgery. And so Brother Gaddy brought up his name. He said, "Well, what about Brother Jordan? How do you feel about Brother Jordan?" I said, "Well, I said, I've got a lot of confidence in Brother Jordan." I said, our church seems to love him, but this is not a conversation that he and I have had. I mean, he didn't come help me with any kind of conversation about a transition in the future. It was just to help me a year. And he said, "Well, do you think that might be a possibility? Would you be comfortable with that?" I said, "Well, I love the Jordans, and I believe the church loves them. But I said, this is something I've got to talk to my pastors about. I've got to talk to my family about." And so that's what really started the process, was a phone call from my superintendent, worried about me physically. And Brother Gaddy had worked with me for 6 years as my youth pastor, so he knew Word of Flame, our church, and he wanted the right thing to happen for Word of Flame, not just for me, but for Word of Flame. And so I talked with my wife, and I talked with my pastors, talked with Brother Thomas, and I told Tim, I've got to talk to them, and I said I've got to talk to Anthony, who's not just advisor but family. And he said, "Well, let's make a trip to Louisiana and talk to him." So me and Tim, a few weeks later, made a trip to Louisiana and visited with Anthony and his executive pastor and talked about the transition. And so I came back, and I talked to my board, and I talked the board. I told my board, church board, that about my conversation with Brother Gaddy, my conversation with my family, and that I just didn't feel like I could keep doing what I was doing as senior pastor. Because the worst thing for my health is stress. I mean, that's what the doctors will tell you. And so obviously pastoring a church, being the senior pastor, there's a lot of stress involved. And I told my church board, I just could not continue to do this. And that I wanted to talk to Brother Jordan to see if he was interested in letting the church vote on him as pastor. And so the first thing I did was got the board behind it, and they were behind me talking to Brother Jordan. And so I called Brother Jordan and set up a meeting with him and basically told him the same thing that I told the board, that I've got these health issues. Brother Gaddy has talked to me, and I cannot continue to do what I'm doing. I can't do this to my family. I've got to step aside. Would you be interested? And it really caught him off guard. He said, "Can you?" And I think this was maybe in November. Uh, and he said, "Can you give me to the end of December to pray about this? Because I, I wasn't expecting this conversation." And so later we got together, and he said that he agreed to that if that's what the church wanted. And so a few weeks after that, I had a business meeting of sorts with the church after the Sunday morning service because I wanted everyone there. And I read a letter that I had prepared, and and then uh, and then told the church, announced to the church that the next Sunday we would have a vote on Brother Jordan, a yes or no vote. And we did that a week later, and he was voted in almost unanimously, all but one vote. And so that's kind of the
Can I
background
ask a
on.
question? And from start to finish, how long did this take? What was the time frame between you bringing him in, you realizing that you needed somebody, even just a temporary, and then to bringing it to the congregation and the vote? How long did that take?
Well, if we're talking about when I first started thinking about transition, before my conversation with Brother Gaddy, probably 2 or 3 years. I mean, uh,
Okay.
again, when these health issues hit and I realized I didn't have the stamina, the creativity, the I started thinking about it then, but from the time that I had the conversation with Brother Gaddy until we had a vote was probably a matter of 2 to 3 months.
Okay. All right. So in preparing the congregation for the transition, uh, what were what was your plan? I mean, how did you uh, prepare your congregation for that transition of bringing in a new man after 32 years?
Well, I guess the only real preparation was just the fact that he had been there with me a little over a year. Again, there was no talk
I got
of
you.
a transition when I brought him there with my board behind the scenes or anything. Uh, there was no promises made. There was no inclination on the part of Brother Jordan that he was interested in any of that. Um, so as far as the preparation for the congregation, I think it was very. I don't think that they saw that coming until I read my resignation. I don't think
Okay.
they saw that coming. I mean, they did, and I'm not just aware of that, but uh, I just basically told them about Brother Gaddy and my conversation with my family and my pastors, and that I just didn't think that I could have effectively give them what I had given them for 32 years, and that
All right.
Brother Jordan had been with us through some very uh I mean, I had heard comments from people that it was a God thing. This is before my transition now, but that it was a God thing that I brought him on staff because he was with us during COVID-19. He was with us during uh the tension and the uproar in America over race relations and the woke business that was going on. We have a multicultural congregation, and Brother Jordan is African American. And so him being on staff during those times was a very settling thing for our church. And
Well,
but as far as so it was he was already there. I trusted him. He had preached a lot for me during that year he was with me,
mhm.
because I was in recovery, and it just later he told the story where he was coming into town from preaching out of town, but this is Brother Jordan now, that God told him to drive by Word of Flame on the freeway. And he drove by the church, and God spoke to him. And this was several years before. And God told him, he said, at some point, you're going to be involved in that church, or you're going to be at that church. And he never told me that. I never heard that until after the transition. So it was obviously,
Amazing.
a God thing. And I have transitioned twice. Um, I know before we spoke, and if you want to edit this out, it's fine. But you said we're going to talk about the positives, not the negatives. And I'd been through a transition before. I started the
Well, we
church
need
in
the
New
we need the
Jersey.
negatives. We need the negatives as well.
We started a church in New Jersey, was there 8 years, left there to come to Arkansas. And the I didn't get the transition right in New Jersey. I thought I did. The guy that took the church was my best friend, and that church was taken out of the organization, and he turned his license in, and you would know that it's anything related to Pentecost or apostolic. And so I wanted to get this one right. And I told the board that. I told Frank Jordan that. I've got to get this one right. This one's got to be right. And cause that Word of Flame's an old church. It's been here over 100 years. I was only the fourth pastor. Brother Jordan's the fifth pastor, and we had to get it right. So I knew Brother Jordan's background. He came from a conservative background, and he wasn't raised in the church, but I had confidence in who he was as a man and as a minister, an apostolic minister.
So, Brother Lumpkin, before we close, I think it would be wise if you were counseling somebody who's approaching this point in his life, and it's you want to do the right things. What we've heard, you want to do the right things, you want to make the right choice because it's your congregation's future, and actually it's your future as well, because sometimes there is some remuneration that is given to the retiring pastor, and sometimes that's on a real thin thread at points in time. So you want to make sure you're making the right choices. What would be your advice to those who are considering exactly what you are, whether there are health problems involved or just simply age, and they know that they're coming to the apex of their pastoral life? What would you suggest to them?
Well, I think the first thing that I would advise would be advice for younger ministers that aren't even there for transition yet, that they're preparing for their retirement as a young person, as a young pastor, so that when they do get to retirement age or transitioning age, that their financial security is secure without having to depend on a board's actions or the new pastor and the ups and downs of perhaps that congregation after he leaves. It could grow or it could decline. And if it declines, then whatever kind of remuneration is planned and is promised can be affected by those things. So the first thing that I would say is, for your own security and for your wife's security, you be working on your retirement now. And if the church wants to bless you with an ongoing retirement, that's great. But if that doesn't happen or something changes after that's in place, because you and I have both heard of situations where things were promised and they didn't come through for whatever reasons,
True.
uh, that changes the dynamic. So that'd be the first thing that I would say. Uh, and I know that probably really doesn't answer your question, but
No,
as far as
it
a person,
actually it does.
okay, but as far as talking to somebody that's contemplating transition at because of age and et cetera, um, I would say they have to have a very good understanding of with their board. Um, I think it's a plus when you're picking a successor that it's somebody that you know, even better, somebody that came up under your ministry or that you have a voice in their life.
I
Um,
agree.
uh, and that there's been a history of loyalty uh, from that person to you and from you to that person. Uh, and and then in situations where that's not the case and it's just the church is just open and they start bringing in people to try out. I think that's there's a certain amount of risk in that. And I know it happens and it can be successful and there's always going to be people in the congregation that feel like they should have had a choice instead of a yes or no vote. But I just if it is that case, if it's that case where you're bringing in somebody that you're really not familiar with, then I just think there needs to be extensive vetting of that person. I'm talking about extensive vetting where you're talking to you interview former pastors and former superintendents and former uh, presbyters and family and really get a good grip on who this person is.
Well, I think that that is an extremely helpful suggestion and insight on wisdom from somebody who's already been there, and you've seen on both sides, a church that you had founded in New Jersey, and then the church that you stepped into in Arkansas there. And I think it's going to be extremely helpful to the elders that are at our age, and then those that are coming in that are younger men who are going to assume those pastorates there. I think it's going to help a lot. And so, Brother Lumpkin, thank you so very much for your insight and your advice to this generation and then to the next generation as well. There was one thing that we said, or you said, before we started this interview, and you got real serious, and you looked at me square in the eye. Well, through the video, you looked me square in the eye and said, "There is somebody else we need to talk to, and that's the wife." And so, I've made up my mind that I'm going to interview Jelaine. I'll have to talk to her myself, I guess, but that I'm going to interview Jelaine, your wife, on her side of this very same story. So thank you so very much, Brother Lumpkin, for your help. And hopefully I'll see you next week with the Sages down in Missouri. And everybody, thank
All
you so
right,
much
sir.
for joining us at this time. Very good. Thank you so much for joining us at this time. And if you are considering a change and a transition in your life, take this And if you know somebody who is going to be transitioning, point them to this podcast, and then and if they need to talk to Brother Lumpkin, his name is in the directory, and they can give him a call there. Thank you so much, and we'll see you the next time around. God bless you all in Jesus' name.